The dog came out of the whiteout like something thrown, and Ethan Cole stood on the brake with both feet. The truck screamed sideways. It stopped 18 inches from 100 pounds of German Shepherd that did not flinch, did not run, did not blink. It sat down in the middle of the highway. It barked twice, sharp, spaced, deliberate, and Ethan felt the blood leave his face because that was not a stray. That was a signal. Somebody had trained this animal and somebody was dying. Subscribe and stay with me to the very end and drop the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. 90 seconds. That was the number Ethan Cole carried out of the funeral, and it rode shotgun with him all the way north into Montana. Not grief exactly. Grief had a shape you could put your hands on. This was arithmetic. 90 seconds between the moment the call came in and the moment his boots hit the dirt. And in that gap, Chief Aaron Reyes had stopped being a man and started being a folded triangle of cloth on the passenger seat of a 15-year-old Ford. He had counted it out 1,000 times since. He had run it in the shower and the chow line in the back of the transport with his helmet in his lap. 90 seconds, 2 breaths slower on the ropes, 1 second lost checking a corner he'd already cleared. He'd had a whole team of doctors tell him that math didn't work like that the outcome had been locked in before he ever moved, and he had nodded and thanked them and gone right back to counting. 30 days of mandatory leave. That was the Navy's answer. Go home, sailor. Sit still. Let it settle. Nothing settled. That was the thing nobody told you. It just moved around inside you, looking for a place to sit down. The storm found him at 4 in the afternoon, an hour out of the pass, and it came the way real weather comes in the Bitterroots, not building, just arriving like a door swinging shut. The radio was still talking then, a woman's voice flat and bored the way emergency voices always are when they've read the same warning 6 times. Winter storm warning in effect for Ravalli County. Travel is strongly discouraged. Highway 93 north of the summit is expected to close by 2200 hours. Ethan checked the clock, 6:40. He did the math without meaning to 3 hours of margin, and he'd need 1.5, and he almost laughed at himself because that was the whole disease right there. Everything in his head came out as a countdown now. He should have pulled off. There was a motel in Darby with a flickering sign and a coffee machine in the lobby, and he'd passed it doing 60, and he'd told himself the reason was that he wanted to sleep in a bed he'd known since he was 14. The truth was uglier, and he knew it. The truth was that stopping meant sitting in a room with the flag. So he drove. The Wipers lost the fight around 7:15. Not gradually. One pass they were clearing glass, and the next pass they were just moving snow from one side of a white wall to the other. And Ethan dropped to 25 and put his hazards on and leaned forward until his chest touched the wheel. He knew this road. He'd learned to drive on this road. He knew there was a guardrail on the right for the next mile, and then nothing at all for the 2 miles after that, just a shoulder that pretended to be solid and a drop that didn't. And he was thinking about that drop, about how it wasn't the falling that killed you. It was that nobody would find you until spring when the shape came out of the white. It happened in less time than it takes to decide anything. There was a wall of snow, and then there was a mass in the wall of snow, low and wide and dark, and Ethan's foot was already down before his brain caught up. Anti-lock brakes hammered under his heel like a heartbeat gone wrong. The rear end broke loose. 2,000 pounds of steel went sideways down a mountain road at night, with a folded flag sliding off the seat and hitting the floor mat. And Ethan turned into it, counter-steered, felt the tires bite gravel through a skin of ice, and stopped. The engine ticked. His pulse was in his ears. 18 inches from the bumper, the dog sat down. Ethan didn't move. He had been shot at on 3 continents, and he could not remember the last time an animal had made his hands shake, but they were shaking. And part of it was adrenaline, and part of it was something else entirely, because a stray does not sit. A stray runs. A stray freezes, then bolts. Every dog Ethan had ever met on a road had either scattered into the trees or come at the window with its tongue out. This one squared its shoulders in the headlights and looked straight through the windshield at him like it had an appointment. It was a big one, adult, deep-chested, the classic tan and black, that saddle of dark across the back, and shoulders the rest, a dusty gold gone silver with snow. Ice was packed into its coat and plates, its muzzle steamed, and its eyes in the wash of the high beams were amber and absolutely steady. "No," Ethan said out loud to nobody. "No, no, no, go on, get." The dog barked twice, sharp, 2 beats evenly spaced, and then silence. Ethan's hand stopped halfway to the door handle. He knew that. He knew that. 2 barks spaced, no growl, no whine. He had heard it in a hangar in Coronado and in a dry riverbed at 3 in the morning, and every single time it had meant the same thing, fine comes to. He got out anyway because there was no version of Ethan Cole that stayed in a warm cab. The cold hit him like a slap with a hand behind it. He had his sea bag in the back and a rain shell somewhere in it, but he was wearing what he'd worn to drive the working camouflage, the digital blue-gray of the U.S. Navy sleeves down boots laced because after 11 years he genuinely did not own a lot of other clothes, and because some stubborn part of him hadn't been ready to take it off yet. Snow went straight through it. He stopped noticing in about 4 seconds, which was its own kind of warning. Hey, he put both hands out where the dog could see them, palms open, and he made his voice low and flat instead of friendly. Friendly. Friendly was for pets. Easy, easy, brother. The dog stood. Not a lunge, not a retreat. It stood, took 3 steps toward the tree line off the shoulder, stopped, and turned its head back over its shoulder. Ethan's stomach dropped through the floor of him. 3 steps. Stop. Look back. He had watched Aaron Reyes work a dog exactly like that on a beach in the Philippines in front of a class of 22 guys who thought they knew everything. You don't chase them, Cole. A good one won't let you chase. A good one takes you. Okay, Ethan said, and his voice came out wrong. Okay, show me. I was 3 feet into the snow when he stopped, swore, and went back for the truck. Not because he'd changed his mind, because 11 years had built something into him that no amount of grief could shut off. And that thing was screaming that a man who walks off a highway at night in a whiteout with no light and no plan is a man who gets found in April. He killed the engine, left the hazards, grabbed the headlamp from the glove box and the med bag from behind the seat, the small one, the one he'd never once unpacked since Africa, because unpacking it meant admitting he'd needed it and it hadn't been enough. He got his shell on over the uniform. He clipped a radio to his chest out of pure habit, knowing exactly what it would do up here, which was nothing. And he picked the flag up off the floor mat and set it back on the seat, squared the way it was supposed to sit. Give me a minute, he said to it, and felt like a lunatic, and shut the door. The dog was still there, waiting, not pacing, not whining, waiting the way a professional waits. Ethan looked at the animal one more time, and this time he looked the way he'd been trained to look, and the details started coming in, and they were all wrong. The collar wasn't a collar. It was tactical webbing, wide doubled with a steel D-ring worn silver at the contact point, the kind of hardware you clipped a lead to when the dog might have to drag a grown man. Old, sun-faded. Somebody had loved it enough to keep it and not enough to replace it. The paws were bleeding, not badly, but the snow under it had gone pink at the edges, and that meant distance. That meant miles. And the left ear, when the animal turned its head into the light, had a faint blue-black smudge inside the flap. Not a scar, ink. Ethan Cole stood in a blizzard on Highway 93 with his heart going like a fist on a door, because you do not tattoo a farm dog. Who are you? He said. The dog turned and went into the trees. The first 200 yards nearly ended it. Snow came to his knees, then his thighs where the wind had piled it, and every step was a full-body argument. His quads burned inside 90 seconds. He was a man who could do a 12-mile ruck without changing his breathing, and he was gassed in 90 seconds, and he understood immediately why he wasn't walking. He was swimming, and he was doing it at 4,000 feet with a 2-day headache and about 600 calories in him. He also understood something worse. His tracks were filling in behind him. Not in an hour, in under a minute. He turned once at the top of the first rise, and the line he cut through the drift had already softened into a suggestion, and beyond it the road, the truck, the hazard lights gone. Completely. Swallowed. There was no back. There was only forward, and forward was a dog. You'd better be right, he said through his teeth. 15 yards ahead, the dog stopped, turned, and waited for him. It did it again 40 seconds later. And again. Every time the gap opened, past about 20 yards, the animal held up, looked back, and did not move until Ethan was closing. That was when he said the name out loud and hated himself for it. Aaron. Because this was Aaron's thing. This was the exact thing Aaron used to make his handlers demonstrate until they wanted to scream. Pace to the slowest man. A dog that leaves you behind isn't leading, it's running. Ethan had heard that speech in a Quonset hut with a cup of terrible coffee going cold in his hand 6 weeks before a call came in 90 seconds too late. And now here it was in the dark in Montana being performed flawlessly by an animal he had never seen before in his life. He shoved it down. He had a lifetime of practice shoving things down. He put his head into the wind and moved. 10 minutes in the dog vanished. 1 second it was a shape at the edge of the headlamp's throw. Oh, the next second the wind changed direction, really changed a hard slap out of the northwest, and the beam bounced back off the snow into his own eyes, and there was nothing in front of him but white. Ethan stopped dead. Hey, nothing. Hey. The wind took the word and shredded it. He couldn't hear his own shout past his own jaw. And that was the moment the fear got it in, not fear of dying. He'd made his peace with that particular idea in a way that probably wasn't healthy, but the specific sickening fear of being useless in the middle of it, of standing in the dark while something happened somewhere else, of being 90 seconds out and closing and not fast enough. He spun a full circle. His own tracks were gone. Every direction was the same direction. Ethan Cole, 530 combat hours, 3 deployments, a chest full of things he never talked about, stood in 18 inches of powder with absolutely no idea which way the road was, and heard himself breathing too fast. "Come on," he said. "Come on, come on." Teeth closed on his sleeve. He nearly put an elbow through the animal's skull on reflex. The dog didn't react at all. It had come up on his blind side without a sound, taken a fold of his shell in its front teeth, carefully, so carefully, no pressure passed the fabric, and it pulled. Ethan let out a breath that shook on the way out. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'm with you." The dog let go and went, and this time it did not get more than 8 yards ahead of him for the rest of the way. Sam. He heard it before he saw anything. That was the part he'd never be able to explain properly afterward, because the wind-up there was a solid wall of noise, a pressure on the ears, and nothing should have come through it. But something did. Thin, high, cut off, a human sound. Ethan's whole body changed. It was not a decision. 11 years of conditioning came up through the floor of him and took the wheel. His breathing dropped, his shoulders came down. His hand went to the headlamp and killed the beam, so his eyes could work. And 30 yards ahead, low against the slope, there was a window with light in it. Not electric light, something orange and weak and guttering. The sound came again, and this time there was no mistaking it. It wasn't wind, it wasn't an animal. It was a woman, and she was screaming, and it was the kind of scream that has already been going on for a long time, frayed at the edges, running out of fuel. The dog broke into a flat run. So did Ethan. He hit the door with his shoulder because the latch didn't want to give, and there wasn't a single part of him interested in negotiating. It banged open. Heat and smoke rolled out over him. He got 2 steps in and stopped. There was a woman half off a bed with a rifle in her hands. She was holding it wrong, one hand under the forestock, the other clamped white-knuckled around the grip elbow, floating no cheek. Weld arms trembling so hard the muzzle was drawing figure eights in the air. She was drenched in sweat. Her hair was pasted to her face. She was very obviously 9 months pregnant, and she was very obviously in labor. And she had still somehow gotten a rifle up off the wall and pointed it at the door. Ethan raised both hands and did not move his feet. "Ma'am." Flat, slow, every syllable landed. "United States Navy. My name is Ethan Cole. You called me here." "I didn't." Her voice broke into a gasp. Her whole body folded around itself. The muzzle dropped 4 inches. "I didn't call anybody." "Your dog did." That did something to her face he wasn't expecting. Something cracked in it. The German Shepherd went past him straight to her and shoved its whole head under her forearm under the rifle and pushed up hard until the barrel was pointing at the ceiling. Then it planted itself between her and the door and looked back at Ethan. The woman made a sound like a laugh with no laugh in it. "Ranger," she said. "Oh God, Ranger." And her hands came off the rifle, and Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides and caught it before it hit the floorboards. He got the weapon clear, dropped the mag, cleared the chamber, set it out of reach. 14 seconds. He didn't think about any of it. Then he was on one knee beside her, and the training took him. And for the first time in 5 weeks, his head was completely blessedly quiet. Pulse fast and thin, 120-something, hard to hold. Skin burning, not warm burning and dry at the neck where it should have been damp. breathing shallow, stacked way too quick between the contractions. Eyes tracking, but slow, a beat behind his fingers. How long, he said. What? How long have you been in labor? Best guess. I don't, she swallowed. Her tongue was thick. Yesterday afternoon, it stopped and then her back arched off the mattress and every muscle in her locked, and she got out one flat, exhausted animal noise through her teeth, and it went on for 40 seconds, and Ethan counted every one of them with 2 fingers on her wrist. When she came out of it, she was crying and didn't seem to know she was. Yesterday afternoon, Ethan repeated. There's no phone. Her hand came up and grabbed a fistful of his sleeve, the same sleeve the dog had taken, and she pulled him down toward her with a strength that had no business existing in a body that far gone. There's no signal up here. I walked out to the ridge. I walked out twice, and then the snow came, and I couldn't. Okay. I couldn't get back down. I couldn't get to the truck. I couldn't. Okay. He put his hand over hers, and he made his voice the one he used on 19-year-olds with holes in them. Look at me. You're done doing this alone. That part's over. She stared at him. Snow was still melting out of his hair and running down his face. He was a stranger in military camouflage who had kicked her door in. Who are you? She whispered. Somebody your dog decided to go get, Ethan said. What's your name? Hannah. Hannah, I'm going to get you to a hospital right now. Nod if you hear me. She nodded. Getting her out took 90 seconds, and he was aware of the number the entire time and refused to look at it. He wrapped her in the blanket off the bed and a coat off the wall hook, and he got one arm under her knees and one across her back, and she was heavier than she looked and lighter than she should have been, and both of those facts told him things he didn't like. The dog was at the door before he was. Then he was outside with a pregnant woman in his arms, and the storm hit them both at once, and Hannah made a high, thin noise into his collarbone, and Ethan turned his shoulder into the wind to shield her face and started down. Down was easier than up. Down was a controlled fall. He did it in 6 minutes with a contraction hitting somewhere in the middle of it, and he had to stop and go to one knee in the snow and hold her while it ran its course, and she gripped his forearm hard enough to leave marks, and he let her. Good, he said. That's good. That one's done. That one's behind us. They keep coming. That's the idea. She laughed, actually laughed, one broken syllable of it, and then she was crying again. He got her to the highway. He got her to within sight of his own hazard lights, still blinking orange somewhere off to the left in the murk. And then he turned right toward town, toward the county road, toward the hospital, 40 minutes down the mountain, and his headlamp caught it, and every plan he had died in his chest. The slide had come off the cut above the road. He didn't need daylight to read it. Nobody who'd grown up under these mountains would. The snow across the highway wasn't lying flat. It was piled a berm of it, dirty gray-white studded with broken timber and slabs the size of chest freezers running the full width of the road and up the far bank, and it went on into the dark farther than his light could reach. Ethan stood there with a woman in his arms and did the assessment anyway because he had to, because you always check. Height 9-10 feet at the crown. Width unknown, more than 50 yards. Composition, hard pack and debris. Time to clear on foot a day. Time to clear with equipment whenever a plow could get up a road that was closing behind them right now. Time until this woman needed a surgeon he did not know, and that was the worst part, and he was not going to say it out loud. Ethan, Hannah's voice was very small against his neck. Why did we stop? He didn't answer. He carried her the 50 yards to the truck. Got the door, got her laid across the bench seat, got the engine running and the heat on full, and her feet elevated on his sea bag. Then he shut the door and stood in the snow with his back to the glass so she couldn't see his face, and he keyed the radio on his chest. Any station. This is Cole on Highway 93 north of the summit. I have a medical emergency. Static. Not even a squelch break. Flat white noise, the same sound the wind was making, like the mountain had learned to imitate him. He tried again. He tried the truck's radio. He climbed onto the hood with his phone held over his head like an idiot, like a man in a commercial, and watched the bar in the corner stay empty while snow filled the collar of his shirt. Nothing. And there it was, the thing he'd been outrunning since the funeral, coming up out of the dark to meet him. A person in front of him dying by inches, and a clock in a gap he couldn't close. 90 seconds. Ethan Cole got down off the hood of his truck and put both hands flat on the cold metal and let his head hang between his arms. And for about 4 seconds, he was not a Navy SEAL at all. He was a 35-year-old man who had already failed once this month and was about to be handed the chance to fail again, and he could not breathe past it. Then the dog barked, once, sharp, right beside his knee. Ethan looked down. The German shepherd was looking up at him with those amber eyes, ice in its coat, blood dried on its feet, and it had run, God knew how many miles through a whiteout, to find one specific human being who could do one specific thing. And it had not quit. It had not sat down in the snow. It had not stood in the road counting seconds. It had gone and gotten help. Yeah, Ethan said hoarse. Yeah, okay. He straightened up. And everything in his head reorganized itself fast and clean, the way it used to before it all went wrong, because the problem had changed and he had been sitting there trying to solve the old one. He wasn't going to get her to a hospital. That option was gone. It had been gone before he'd ever picked her up. So the hospital was going to have to be him. He got back in the cab and the heat hit him and Hannah's eyes were closed. And for one terrible second he thought, and then she moved. Hannah. Hannah. He put his hand on her shoulder. Eyes on me. They opened. Slow. Too slow. There's a slot across the road, he said. She didn't react at first. Then she did, and he watched it land on her face in stages: confusion, then understanding, then a fear so total it stopped her breathing. Then we go the other way. Passes closed behind us. Has been for an hour. There's a Forest Service road off the Pirkian. Under 4 feet of powder, with no plow on it since November. He kept his voice level. He kept it kind, mind. But he did not lie to her, not once, not then, and not later, because she was going to have to trust him in about 20 minutes with something that mattered more than her own life, and you did not build that on a lie. Hannah, nobody is coming up this mountain tonight. Not a plow, not an ambulance, not a helicopter, not in this, not until this system blows through, and that's 30 hours. Her mouth opened, closed. I'm going to die, she said. No, you're not. You don't know that? I know it. He leaned in. Listen to me. I'm a Navy SEAL. Do you know what that actually means out here tonight? It means I'm a combat medic with 11 years of doing the worst possible version of this in the worst possible places with less than I've got in this truck right now. I've kept men alive in a ditch for 6 hours. I've done surgery by headlamp. I have delivered a baby exactly once in a village outside Djibouti at 2 in the morning, and that kid is 9 years old now. She was staring at him. I'm not the doctor you want, Ethan said, but I promise you I'm not the worst one you could get. Her chin started to go. She fought it and lost. I'm so scared, she said. I know. Nobody knows I'm up here. Her hands closed on the front of his shirt. Nobody. If something happens to me, nobody's coming. Nobody even. Something already happened to you, Ethan said, and I came. She broke. He held on to her while she did it, one hand behind her head, the way you hold somebody who's finally allowed to stop being brave, and the dog got its front paws up on the seat and shoved its head in under her arm and stayed there. And outside, the wind came down off the ridge and hit the truck hard enough to rock it on its springs. When she'd stopped shaking, Ethan pulled back and looked her in the eye. Here's what happens now, he said. I'm taking you back up to that cabin because it's got 4 walls and a fire, and I need both. I'm going to boil water. I'm going to sterilize everything in that bag. I'm going to wash my hands until the skin comes off. And then you and I are going to have this baby right there tonight, and the storm can do whatever it wants. Hannah closed her eyes. A tear went sideways into her hair. Okay, she whispered. Say it like you mean it. Okay, good. He reached past her for the med bag. One more thing. I need your last name for the record, in case I have to hand you off to somebody. She was quiet for a second too long. Then her hand came out and caught his wrist, not the desperate grip from before. Different, tight and deliberate, and her eyes were suddenly terrifyingly clear. Vance, she said. Hannah Vance. And Ethan, listen to me. Whatever happens tonight, whatever happens after. He waited. Don't call the sheriff, she said. Ethan didn't answer right away. 11 years of training had taught him a lot of things, and one of them was that when somebody says something like that in that tone with that grip, you don't argue with it and you don't agree with it. You file it and you keep moving. because the thing in front of you is still the thing in front of you. Copy, he said. That's it, copy. You're 7 centimeters into the worst night of your life. You want to have that conversation now or you want to have it after? Her jaw worked. After. Then it's after. He put the truck in gear. Hold on. He couldn't drive her up. There was no road up. What he did was drive the truck 40 yards forward until the front bumper was almost touching the slide. Kill the headlights and leave the hazards running, because a berm across a highway with no warning on it was how the next person died, and because some part of him refused to accept that nobody was coming. Then he shut the engine off, and the silence in the cab was the loudest thing that had happened all night. Ethan. Yeah. If you carry me back up there, Hannah said, you're not carrying me back down. Not tonight. You understand that whatever you're deciding right now, you don't get to change your mind in an hour. Ethan looked at her. Ma'am, he said, I stopped having other options about 4 minutes ago. He carried her the 600 yards back up in 11 minutes, and it cost him more than the first descent had cost him twice over, because now it was uphill. And now she was cramping every 4 minutes, and every time she cramped, he had to stop, go down on one knee, brace her, and wait it out while the wind tried to take the skin off the side of his face. 4 minutes. He clocked it on the third one, and it hollowed him out. 4 minutes apart meant this wasn't a long night. This was a short one. The dog ran the whole thing in front of him, not ranging, not sniffing, just breaking trail through the deepest sections with its chest like a plow. And Ethan understood after the second drift that it was doing that on purpose. It was picking his line for him. It was putting its own body through the worst of the snow so a man carrying a woman didn't have to. You've done this before, Ethan said out loud, breathing hard. Haven't you? The dog didn't look back. It just kept clearing the way. At the door, Hannah's whole body seized again, and this one was different, longer, deeper. And at the end of it, she made a sound he'd never heard from a human being, a low grinding note that came from somewhere underneath language. Then she gasped, something's changed. And Ethan Cole, who had walked toward gunfire on 4 continents, felt genuine fear go through him like cold water. He put her on the bed, and then he stopped touching her, because the next 20 minutes were not going to be about touching her. They were going to be about setting up, and if he got the setup wrong, nothing else would matter. He talked the entire time. That was deliberate. A patient who can hear your voice is a patient who isn't alone in there. Fire first, he said, feeding split pine into the stove until it roared. Because you're going to be uncovered and wet, and I need this room hot. Not warm, hot. You're going to hate it, and I don't care. Ethan. Water second. He had every pot in the cabin on the stovetop. 2 boiling, 1 cooling. I need cooled boiled water for the baby's face, and I need a rolling boil for everything I'm going to touch you with. Ethan. Talk while I work, that's fine, but don't ask me to stop working. He tore into the med bag and started laying it out on a cloth in a line. Trauma shears, hemostats, 2 clamps, gauze, a suture kit. He prayed to God he wouldn't open a bulb syringe. A bag of saline, an 18-gauge needle, iodine gloves, and 1 clean field drape that had been folded in that bag since Djibouti and had never come out. Hannah, talk to me. Any allergies? Penicillin. Good. Any complications? This pregnancy, blood pressure, bleeding? Anything the doctor got twitchy about? Silence. Ethan stopped and looked up. Hannah. I haven't seen a doctor since November, she said. His hands went still on the drape. Say again. I haven't seen a doctor since November, she repeated, and her voice was steady and awful. Not since I came up here. I couldn't go into town. I couldn't be seen in town. So no ultrasound, no blood work, no idea. I don't even know if it's a boy or a girl. Ethan absorbed that in about a second and a half, and outwardly he did not react at all, and internally the entire operation reorganized itself around a black hole. No presentation, no position, no placental site, no idea if this was 1 baby or 2. He was going in completely blind in a log cabin 30 hours from another human being with a medical license. Okay, he said, just okay. What do you want me to say? He went back to the drape. That it's bad. You know it's bad. You've known for 4 months. That's why you had a rifle up when I came through that door, isn't it? You weren't scared of a bear. The fire popped. She didn't answer. After, Ethan said, and kept working. He scrubbed his hands and forearms for 3 straight minutes, with the last of a bar of soap in water hot enough to hurt, and then a second time with iodine. And while he did it, he made her drink small sips, constant half a canteen of the cooled boiled water, with a pinch of salt and a spoonful of honey. He'd found in the cupboard, stirred through it because she'd been in labor for over a day with nothing in her, and a dehydrated woman does not have the muscle to push. The dog lay against her hip the entire time, and every time she tensed, the dog pressed harder, and every time she came out of it, the dog licked her wrist twice and stopped. Twice. Always twice. Ethan clocked that too and had no room in his head for it. Ranger, he said. That's his name. Yeah. Whose dog is he? Her breath hitched, and it wasn't a contraction. My husband's, she said. Where's your husband? Dead. The word came out flat and worn smooth, the way words do when a person has said them to themselves several thousand times. 4 months ago, she said. They told me he went off the switchback at mile 9. They told me the road was icy. A small, ugly laugh. It was the 14th of October. There wasn't any ice on that road on the 14th of October. Ethan pulled his gloves on. Snap, snap. After, he said quietly. I'm sorry, it has to be after. I know, but I heard you. Her eyes came up and found his, and something in her face let go, not relief exactly. Something closer to a person setting down a bag she'd been carrying alone for 120 days. Okay, she said, then let's have this baby. It went badly almost immediately. Ethan checked her and his face did something, and he schooled it in under a second, but she caught it because a woman in that much pain notices everything. What? Nothing, you're complete. It's time. You looked at me and did a thing. You're fully dilated, and it's time to push, Ethan said. And I'm going to need every ounce of you, and the second you start spending energy on my face is the second we're in trouble. So look at the dog and listen to my voice. She looked at the dog. On the next one, Ethan said, chin down, hold your breath, and push into your back like you're trying to break the bed. Not your throat, your back. 10 seconds, I'll count. The next one came in 90 seconds, and she screamed through the first 4 of them. Chin down, don't spend it on noise. He got a hand behind her shoulders and lifted. 9, 8, 7, that's it, Hannah, that's it. 4 pushes, 6, 9. By the 12th, she was gray around the mouth and shaking between contractions and starting to say she couldn't, and by the 15th, she had stopped saying anything at all, and Ethan felt the whole thing beginning to slide out from under him. Hannah, look at me. Nothing. Hannah, her eyes rolled toward him, half-lidded. You've got maybe 6 good ones left in you, he said. That's it. That's the tank. And I need every one of them to count, so I'm going to tell you the truth, and you're going to hate it. You are not going to survive an 8-hour labor tonight. Not in the shape you're in, so we're not having an 8-hour labor. We're going to do this in the next 20 minutes, you and me, and then you're going to lie back, and I'm going to hand you your kid. Do you believe me? Her mouth moved. Nothing came out. Ethan took her face in both gloved hands. He came for you, he said. That dog ran himself bloody down a mountain in a blizzard and stood in front of a truck doing 60 because he was not going to let you go. Now don't you dare make a liar out of him. Something came back into her eyes. Bastard, she whispered. Yeah, and she pushed. The head crowned on the 18th push, and Ethan said, stop. What? Stop pushing, pant. Like this, he demonstrated quick and shallow. Small breaths, don't push. I need 30 seconds. I can't stop. You can, pant. He got 2 fingers in and felt what he'd been dreading since the moment he'd looked at her and made a face, the cord tight wrapped once around the neck and pulled taut as a guitar string. He did not have 30 seconds. He had about 10. Ethan, what's happening? Pant. What's happening? He got his index finger under the cord, and it would not move. It was drum tight. Every millimeter the baby descended pulled it tighter around its own throat, and if he clamped and cut it here, he was starting a clock that ran in seconds instead of minutes. And if he didn't, the baby strangled on the way out. Ranger's head came up off the bed. The dog was staring at Ethan's hands. Come on, Ethan breathed. Come on, come on. He got a second finger under, took the slack he didn't have, and slipped the loop forward over the head in one continuous motion. It cleared. Now push, 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 push. She pushed, and the baby came out into Ethan Cole's hands, wet and hot and heavier than he expected, and he had it, and he turned it, and he looked at it. It was blue. It wasn't moving. It wasn't making any sound at all. Hannah said, give me a second. Why isn't it crying? Give me a second. He got the baby prone along his left forearm, head lower than the body heel of his right hand between the shoulder blades, and he rubbed harder than looked survivable. The coarse, fast friction that isn't gentleness. That's a wake-up call delivered through skin. Nothing. Bulb syringe, mouth first, then nose, and it came back with fluid in it, and he cleared it and did it again and got more. Nothing. 15 seconds. Ethan. 20 seconds. He flipped the baby 2 fingers on the sternum and gave it 5 quick compressions and then covered its mouth and nose with his own mouth and gave it 2 puffs. Not breaths, puffs, the volume of what's in your cheeks, because a newborn's lungs are the size of walnuts, and a grown man's breath will destroy them. Chest rose, chest fell, nothing. 30 seconds. And Ethan Cole, on his knees on the floor of a cabin in the Bitterroots, heard the number in his head start over. 90 seconds. Not this time, not this one, not in his hands. Come on, he said against the baby's face. Come on, sailor, come on. Puff, puff, rub, 40 seconds. Behind him, Hannah was making a sound he would hear in his sleep for the rest of his life. And Ranger was up on the bed on all 4 feet with his ears flat back, and the fire was roaring, and outside the wind came down off the ridge and hit the cabin like a hand. 50 seconds. Puff, puff. 55. Rub. And the baby jerked. One in convulsive full-body jerk, and the arms flew out, and the tiny mouth opened, and out of it came a sound so thin and so furious and so unbelievably loud that Ethan's whole chest caved in around it. She screamed. She was a she, and she screamed, and she went from blue to gray to a mottled, outraged pink in about 11 seconds. And Ethan Cole knelt on the floorboards with a shrieking newborn in both hands and put his forehead down on the edge of the mattress because his neck would not hold his head up anymore. Hannah was sobbing, actually sobbing, hands over her face, her whole body shaking with it. And Ranger threw his head back and howled. Not a bark, a long, cracked, rising howl that filled the cabin. And Ethan lifted his head and looked at that dog and thought with total clarity, you know exactly what just happened here. Hands, he said, hoarse. Hannah, give me your hands, open your shirt, skin to skin. She can't hold her own temperature. He put her daughter on her chest and pulled the blanket over the both of them, and Hannah's hands came up around that baby like a cage closing. And she said something into her daughter's head that Ethan didn't catch and didn't try to. He clamped the cord in 2 places with hemostats, waited the 2 minutes he could afford, and cut it with sterilized shears. Then he sat back on his heels and let himself have exactly 5 seconds. He spent all 5 of them thinking I did it. I actually did it. 90 seconds and I got there this time. Then he looked down and saw the blood on the sheet, and every one of those 5 seconds turned to acid in his mouth. It was too much. He knew it instantly, the way you know a sound is a gunshot before you've consciously identified it. Not a trickle, not the normal expected mess of a delivery, a steady, dark, ongoing flow, and while he watched it spread another inch across the sheet, Hannah, her eyes were closed. She was smiling. She's so mad. Listen to her. She's so mad. Hannah, I need you to stay with me. I'm here. No, you're going. He was already moving. Gloves off, gloves on. Placenta first, then I stop the bleeding. And I'm going to do something now that's going to hurt worse than anything that's happened tonight. And I need you to let me. That got her eyes open. Worse than that. Yeah, you're kidding. I'm not. He waited for the placenta 3 minutes that felt like 20 controlled traction. One hand guarding, because if he tore it, he was finished. It came. He checked it, spread it out, counted lobes, and checked the membranes for a missing piece, and it was complete. And that was the only good news he'd had in an hour. Then he put the heel of his hand low on her abdomen, found the fundus, soft, boggy, not clamping down the way it had to, and he pushed. Hannah came up off the mattress screaming. I know. He didn't stop. I know. 90 seconds. Stop. Can't. Ethan. Hannah, your uterus has to squeeze shut or you bleed out, and it isn't squeezing, so I'm going to squeeze it for you. He kept the pressure on, hard and rhythmic. Baby on the breast, right now, get her latched. It makes your body do this on its own. Hannah, sobbing, shaking, got her daughter to her chest. And Ethan felt it, under his hand, slow at first, and then unmistakable, the whole mass of it tightening down into something firm and round and right. He watched the sheet, the spread stopped. He held the pressure for 4 more minutes anyway, counting, and then he eased off by degrees and it held. It held. He got the saline into her left arm on the second stick, hung the bag off a nail in the wall, and only then did he take his gloves off, and his hands were shaking so badly it took him 3 tries. The clock on the far wall said 2:47 a.m. Ethan sat on the floor with his back against the bed frame and did not move for a long time. He'd been going for 6 hours. His uniform was ruined. He was so hungry he'd stopped feeling it, which he knew from experience was the dangerous part. Ethan, yeah. Am I dying? And no. You're not just saying that. You're on your third liter. Your fundus is firm and your color's coming back, he said. You lost a lot. You're going to be flat on your back for a week, and you're going to need iron and probably a transfusion when we can get you down. But no, you're not dying. She was quiet. You said you'd tell me the truth. That is the truth. Okay, she said. And then Ethan, thank you, doesn't there isn't a don't. Why not? He looked at the fire. Because 5 weeks ago, I was 90 seconds too slow for the best man I ever knew, Ethan said, and I have not been able to breathe right since. And tonight I was on time. So you don't owe me anything. You handed me something. Let's leave it there. He heard her shift. He didn't look over. Who was he? She asked. Doesn't matter tonight. Ethan. His name was Aaron, he said. That's as far as I go right now, ma'am, and I mean it kindly. He got up an hour later because he had to check the stove and his legs almost didn't take it. He stood there feeding wood in and became aware gradually that the sound outside had changed, not stopped. The wind was still working the eaves, but underneath it there was a low mechanical drone and it was getting closer and it was coming up the ridge from the wrong direction entirely. Ethan Cole went absolutely still. There was no road up here. That was the whole point of this place. There was a footpath and 600 yards of vertical and a highway with 10 feet of slide across it. Nothing on wheels was coming up that ridge, but something on tracks would. Ranger's head came up off the bed. Then the dog was off the mattress and at the door with his hackles up in a ridge from his shoulders to his tail, and he was growling a low, continuous rumble. Ethan hadn't heard from him once all night, not at the door, not at the rifle, not at anything. Hannah, she surfaced. What? Is there anybody who knows you're up here, anybody at all? No. She was awake now, fast. No, that's the point. Why? The drone got louder. Headlights swung across the window and went past and came back. Ethan reached over, picked her rifle up off the floor, and thumbed the magazine back in. Ethan, what is it? Somebody's coming up the mountain, he said. That's good. She stopped. He watched it hit her. He watched her face go the color of the sheet. Oh, God. Yeah. Ethan listened to me. She had his sleeve again, and her hand was ice. Whoever that is, they didn't come to help. Nobody helps up here. Nobody has ever come up here. I need a name, Hannah. Right now, no after, no waiting. Who are you hiding from? Outside the engine cut. A door opened and shut, and a man's voice called up cheerfully through the dark, close enough that Ethan could hear him smiling. Hannah, honey, it is Royce Sheriff's office. Sweetheart, are you in there? I've been looking for you all night. Hannah Vance stopped breathing. Don't, she whispered. Ethan, don't open that door. He held that seal down for 19 minutes. I knew the number because he counted the way he counted everything, and because counting was the only thing standing between Ethan Cole and the part of himself that had come off its hinges 4 minutes earlier and had not entirely gone back on. Somewhere in the middle of it, he became aware that he was still triaging. That was the training. It didn't ask permission. Somewhere underneath the noise in his head, a cold, clean voice was running the room. Dog chest wound high, probably missed the heart, or he'd already be gone. Deputy gut shot, conscious talking hours. Not minutes man with the broken arm. No threat crying man on the floor. Unconscious breathing. And Ethan had done that with his hands and would think about it later. Hannah, yeah, her voice came from somewhere behind him. Steadier than it had any right to be. Are you bleeding? What? Are you bleeding again? Answer the question. A pause. No, I don't think so. No. Good. Then I need you. She crawled over with her daughter tied against her chest in a bedsheet. She'd nodded one-handed, and Ethan Cole would remember that image longer than he remembered the fight. A woman 4 hours postpartum, gray-faced, one arm still trailing an IV line, crawling across a floor to help. Put your hands where mine are, both of them. Lean on it, no with your weight. Don't be gentle, you can't hurt him worse than he already is. She got her palms down over the seal. Okay, she said. Okay, I have him. Go. Ethan got up and nearly went straight back down because his rib had decided to introduce itself properly, and the room did a slow half-turn around him. He put a hand on the wall and waited it out. Then he went to Royce Harden. The deputy was still sitting against the wall where he'd landed, both hands over his stomach, and he looked up when Ethan crouched, and there was no fight left in him at all. "You gonna work on me," Harden said, "or watch, move your hands." "Abandon, move your hands, Royce." He moved them. Ethan cut the parka open with the trauma shears, packed the wound with the last of his gauze, and got a pressure dressing over it. And he did all of it with the professional gentleness he'd have given anyone. Harden watched him do it with an expression Ethan had seen on exactly 2 other men in his life. "Why?" Harden said. "Because that's the job. I helped kill her husband." "Yeah." Ethan cinched the strap. "And in about 3 hours, you're going to tell a federal agent exactly how in a hospital bed on a recording. That's why you're not allowed to die in this cabin." Harden laughed, and it turned into a cough, and the cough turned into something that made him grip Ethan's wrist. "Sailor, don't talk. There's a fourth one." Ethan went very still. "What?" "There were 4 of them, and Marcus." Harden's eyes were losing focus, and he was fighting it. "The one that went after your dog down the hill. He never came back up." "Which means he's still out there. Or he's already gone down to the road." Harden's grip tightened. "Son, listen. It don't matter which, because whichever it is, he called it in. That's the protocol, that's what they do, they report. Which means the man who's paying for all this has known for 20 minutes that it went wrong. Merrick. Grant Merrick." Harden closed his eyes. "And he's got people in Missoula, and people in Helena, and a lawyer on retainer who eats guys like you for lunch. So whatever's on that card, you don't get one day. You don't get 1 hour. The second the sun comes up and the phones work, it's over." Ethan stood up and made himself think. 4 hours until dawn. A slide across the highway. 3 snow machines, one of them shot through the engine block. A newborn, a hemorrhaging mother, a dying dog, a gut-shot deputy, 2 prisoners, and 1 working radio that had never gotten anything but static. He looked at the radio, then he looked out the broken doorway at the machines on the slope. "Hannah. He's still breathing. His gums are white, Ethan. I know. Listen to me." He came back and knelt. "There's a snowcat down there with a heated cab and a working engine. That's a real ambulance. That's how everybody in this room gets to a hospital. Then go get it. It's 80 yards downhill in the dark, and there's one of them unaccounted for," Ethan said. "And if he's out there and he's smart, that machine is exactly where he's waiting because he knows it's the only thing I want." Hannah looked up at him. "So don't be smart," she said. "What? You keep doing math." Her voice cracked. "You've been doing math since you walked in that door, and you were right every time, and I'm not Ethan. My daughter is 4 hours old, and there's a man bleeding on my floor, and your dog is dying under my hands. So stop being right. Just go get the truck." I went. He didn't run. Running is loud and fast and predictable, and he was hurt, and hurt men who run fall down. He went low and slow along the tree line, with the shooter's handgun in his right hand and his left arm clamped against his ribs, and it took him 9 minutes to cover 80 yards. And every one of those minutes cost him something. The 4th man was there. I was sitting in the cab of the middle machine with the door cracked, and he was on a satellite phone, and he was talking, and he had a rifle across his knees. Ethan came up on the blind quarter and put the muzzle against the window glass. "Hang up." The man froze. "Hang up the phone and drop it out the door and put both hands on the dash." "You've got no idea." "Hang up the phone." He hung up. The phone hit the snow. The hands went on the dash. "How long were you talking?" "Long enough." "Answer the question." 90 seconds, the man said. "Maybe 2 minutes. And Ethan Cole started laughing, and it came out so wrong that the man in the cab actually flinched. "Get out," Ethan said. "You're going to help me carry a dog." The cab of that snowcat held 5 people, and by 5 o'clock in the morning, it held 6 and a German shepherd. Ethan drove. Hannah sat behind him with her daughter under her coat and both hands still on the chest seal. Hardin was propped in the corner with his own belt around his knees. The man with the broken arm sat with the man Ethan had beaten unconscious, slumped against him, and the fourth one drove nothing and said nothing and stared at the floor with his wrists zip-tied through a grab handle with the cord out of the cabin's window blind. It took 2 hours and 10 minutes to cover 11 miles. At some point in the second hour, Hannah said into the noise of the engine. He stopped moving. Ethan's hands went white on the wheel. His chest, Hannah said. It's still going, but he stopped. He was pushing his legs before like he was running and he stopped. Keep the pressure on. Ethan, keep the pressure on and talk to him. About what, anything, I don't care. He can hear you. So Hannah Vance, who had not slept in 2 days and had lost more blood than she could afford, put her mouth down next to a dying dog's ear and told him about the day her brother brought him home, about how the puppy had gotten into the trash, about how he'd been afraid of the vacuum. And she cried the entire time and did not stop talking once, and Ethan drove and listened and did not say a single word because his throat did not work. They came off the mountain at 8 minutes past 7, and the world reached up and grabbed them. The first thing was the phones, 4 bars all at once, and Ethan's went off in his pocket like something angry. The second thing was that the plow had been through, which meant the highway was open, which meant Elk Ridge General was 22 minutes away instead of never. The third thing was that Ethan Cole, who had spent 11 years learning exactly who to call and in what order, called nobody local. He called a number he'd had in his phone since a joint task force in 20 and had never once used, and a woman answered on the fourth ring, sounding like she'd been up all night. Vega. Ma'am, this is Ethan Cole. Special Operations, we work the Kandahar contracting thing out of Bagram. A pause. Cole, yeah, it's 7 in the morning. Ma'am, I need you to write down 3 things and then I need you to move very fast. Go. 1. Merrick Logistics, Missoula, Montana. 2. Daniel Vance, forensic accountant, died. 14 October, ruled single vehicle. 3. He looked in the mirror at Hannah. I have a Ravalli County Sheriff's deputy in this vehicle with a gunshot wound who admitted in front of 4 witnesses to providing the route. The silence on the other end changed quality entirely. Cole. Ma'am, where's the evidence? In my hand. Do not give it to a single person in that county, Marisol Vega said. Not a deputy, not a police chief, not a hospital security guard. Do you understand me? Nobody in Ravalli County. That's the second time I've been told that in 12 hours. Then somebody smart told you first. The emergency entrance at Elk Ridge General was not built for a snowcat, and Ethan put one anyway, sideways across the ambulance bay, and was out of the cab before it stopped rocking. What followed was 6 minutes of controlled chaos that he narrated the entire way, because that was the only thing he had left to give. Postpartum hemorrhage, precipitous delivery. About 11 hours ago, estimated blood loss 1,200. She's had 3 liters of saline and no blood products. She's RH unknown. Sir, are you? Neonate term, 4 hours. No, 12 hours. Sorry, 12 hours. APGAR was maybe 2. At 1 minute, I got her back at 55 seconds of ventilation. She's been feeding. She's pink. She's fine. Sir, gunshot abdomen. Right upper quadrant entry, no exit packed and pressure dressed at 0420. He's had nothing for pain. A woman in scrubs finally got both hands on his shoulders and physically stopped him. Sir, you're bleeding out of your ear. Ethan blinked at her. Am I, he said. Sit down. Ma'am, there's a dog in that vehicle. There is a dog in that vehicle, Ethan said, with a gunshot wound to the chest, and he has been holding a seal for 3 hours, and I need somebody to go get him right now, and I understand completely that that is not your job. She looked at him, then she turned around and shouted down the corridor, somebody call Marlene at the vet clinic and tell her to open up. I didn't sit down for another 40 minutes. He rode in the back of a pickup with Ranger's head on his thigh to a small animal clinic on the north end of town, where a 70-year-old veterinarian named Marlene Boyd was standing in the parking lot in a bathrobe with the door already unlocked. She took one look and said, "Get him on the table, don't talk to me while I'm reading him." Ethan stood against the wall of that surgery for 3 hours because nobody made him leave. At 10:40, she came out, pulled her mask down and said, "You a religious man?" "No, ma'am." "Well," she said, the round went through the top of his chest and out under the shoulder blade. Broke a rib, took a piece of muscle, missed the big vessels. By about the width of my thumb, collapsed the lung on that side. I've got a drain in him. Ethan's mouth had gone completely dry. Marlene. He'll limp, she said. Front left permanently on cold days. He'll hate you for it. She pulled her gloves off. But he's going to walk out of here, son. Ethan Cole put his back against the wall and slid all the way down it to the floor and put his hands over his face and made absolutely no sound at all and stayed like that for a long time. Special Agent Marisol Vega landed in Missoula at 1:15 that afternoon with 2 people, and by 5 o'clock, she had 11. She took the card off Ethan in the hospital parking lot with a witness in a chain of custody form and a camera running, and she read the first 4 documents on a laptop on the hood of a rental car, and Ethan watched her face while she did it. He'd seen a lot of faces, read a lot of bad news. He'd never seen one do what hers did. Cole, she said. Ma'am, how much of this did you read? Enough to know what I was carrying. Say it out loud. I want to know if we're reading it the same way. Ethan looked out at the parking lot. Merrick Logistics had a contract to supply ballistic plates, he said. Level 4 rifle rated, 22,000 units over 4 years. Somewhere in year 2, they switched the ceramic supplier to save money and the new plates failed. Tests, not marginally, they failed. Bad, they were stopping pistol rounds and nothing else. And instead of eating the loss, somebody at that company took the failed lot reports and had them rewritten. Go on. There's an email in there, Ethan said, and his voice did something he couldn't control. 12 March from a quality manager. He says, quote, these are going on people. And a man named Grant Merrick replies, and what he says is they're going on inventory. Vega didn't say anything. Daniel Vance found that email, Ethan said. That's it. That's the whole crime. A guy who read invoices found one email, and instead of deleting it, he put it on a card and sewed it into his dog's collar and started making calls, and 11 days later, he was in a ravine at mile 9. Cole. There's a list at the end, he said, in his handwriting. 9 names. He worked out which units the bad lot shipped to, and then he went through the casualty reports and cross-referenced them, and he found 9 names, ma'am, and 2 of them. He stopped. Take a minute, Vega said. I don't need a minute. Take one anyway. They arrested Grant Merrick 11 days later. He was 61 years old, and he had a good jaw and a better lawyer, and he was standing on a stage at the Missoula Convention Center at a black tie fundraiser for a veterans housing initiative that his own foundation underwrote. And he had just been handed a Crystal Award shaped like a star, and he was in the middle of a sentence about sacrifice when Marisol Vega walked up the steps with a folder. 800 people watched it happen. 4 of them were shooting video on their phones. Merrick said into a live microphone, you people have no idea who I am. And Vega, who did not know the mic was live, and would later say she wouldn't have changed a word if she had said, sir, I know exactly who you are. I've read your email. The case took 19 months. Royce Harden lived and testified for 3 days, and his testimony was the spine of the whole thing. And when the defense attorney asked him why he was doing it, he said, because a Navy corpsman packed my gut in a cabin at 4 in the morning when he had every reason on God's earth to let me bleed, and I've had a lot of time to think about that. He went to prison for 8 years. He did not appeal. The man named Marcus took a plea and gave them the dispatcher, the 2 Missoula patrolmen, and a state contracting officer in Helena. The dog shooting charge got folded into the rest of it, and Ethan asked Vega about it exactly once, and she said, Cole, he's going away for 26 years. And Ethan said, not for that, though. And Vega said, no, not for that. And neither of them said anything else. Grant Merrick was convicted on 41 counts. Fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and 2 counts of second-degree murder. Daniel Vance and a 23-year-old Lance Corporal named Isaiah Ford, who had been wearing a plate stamped with a lot number that appeared on page 9 of a list written in a dead accountant's handwriting. Hannah Vance testified on the 4th day. She was asked to identify her husband's handwriting, and she did. She was asked what he told her before he died, and she said it. And then the prosecutor asked one more question off script because he was human. Mrs. Vance, how was that evidence recovered? And Hannah looked at the gallery at the 3rd row where a large tan and black German Shepherd was lying on the floor between a man in dress blues and an aisle. And she said, my husband left it with the only person in the world he could still trust. The jury was out for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Spring came late that year, and nobody in Ravalli County complained about it. Ethan drove Hannah and the baby back up the ridge on the first weekend in May, and the cabin was still standing and the door was still broken, and they fixed it. That was the first thing. He hung a new door, and she held the level, and neither of them said anything about the frame it replaced. They spent 3 weekends up there. He rebuilt the porch. She painted the shutters, a color she picked out of a magazine, and then hated and then decided to keep. Marlene Boyd came up once with a bag of dog food and stayed for 6 hours. Ranger limped, front left on cold mornings exactly like she'd said. He also never once let that baby out of a room without following her. The thing Ethan Cole had not done, the thing he'd been carrying for 19 months and could not make himself finish. He finished in June, sitting on that new porch with a beer he wasn't drinking. Hannah. I never asked you your brother's name. She turned her head. You did, she said. That night, right before the lights came up the hill. And you never got to answer. No. She was quiet a second. You know, I've thought about that. I've thought about it a lot, actually. And then I figured you must have looked it up by now. You're you. I didn't look it up. Why not? Ethan turned the bottle in his hands. Because I already knew, he said. He'd known since he lifted the dog's ear on the cabin floor and read R412 off a tattoo, because there had been exactly one dog with that tattoo in his life, and there had been exactly one man who handled him, and that man had stood in a Quonset hut in Coronado with a cup of terrible coffee and told a room full of guys who thought they knew everything. You don't chase them, Cole. A good one won't let you chase. A good one takes you. Aaron Reyes, Ethan said. Hannah's hand stopped moving in her daughter's hair. He was my brother. He was my chief. Ethan's voice was very even, and it cost him everything he had. 11 years. He pulled me out of a river in Coronado in week 3 when I was ready to quit. He was at my mother's funeral. He was the best man I ever knew, and he died 5 weeks before I came over that pass. And I was 90 seconds late, and I have never in my life said that sentence to another human being. Hannah put her hand over her mouth. Aaron adopted this dog out of the program in 2021, Ethan said. R412 was medically retired after an IED cleared him. Aaron said he said the dog had done his part and somebody owed him a couch. He had to stop for a second. And then Aaron shipped out and he gave the dog to his sister, and his sister gave him to her husband. And her husband got murdered. And that dog spent 4 months on a mountain guarding a pregnant woman who had nobody left. Ethan. And on the worst night of the winter, he said, he came down off that ridge and walked into the middle of a highway and stopped the one truck in Montana that had Aaron's flag on the passenger seat. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Then Hannah said in a voice barely over a whisper, he was waiting for you. That's not, you said it yourself in the cabin. You said you've done this before, haven't you? She was crying and not wiping it. Ethan, I told you that first night. I said he never really transferred over. I said he was always waiting for somebody else. Hannah, I was waiting for somebody in that uniform, she said, for 2 years, and you drove past. Ethan Cole left the Navy in September. Not because he was broken. He'd finally, and to the considerable surprise of the Navy psychologist, who'd been seeing him for 11 months, stopped being broken. He left because a 70-year-old veterinarian in a bathrobe had said something to him at 10:40 in the morning in an empty parking lot, and because he'd finally worked out what to do with a number. He started a program in Hamilton, Montana in a leased barn with a bad roof, training retired military and shelter dogs to work with veterans who couldn't sleep. He named it R412. People assumed it was a grid reference. He let them. The first year they placed 9 dogs. The 5th year they placed 211. There is a photograph on the wall inside the door of that barn. It is not a good photograph. It is slightly out of focus, and somebody's thumb is in the corner of it. It shows a man in Navy working uniform, laughing with his hand on the head of a young German shepherd, and in the background, blurry and unaware, a younger man is crouched down tying his boot. Nobody who works there has ever been told the whole story. They all know the dog, though. He came in every day until he was 14, and he slept in the doorway of the room where the new handlers trained, and he limped on the front, left on cold mornings, and every single person who walked through that door had to step over him to get in. Hannah Vance's daughter turned 6 the year the settlement finished paying out. Most of it went to the 9 families. That was Hannah's decision, and she made it in about 4 seconds and never revisited it. What was left bought a house in Hamilton with a yard and paid for a girl's education a long way down the road. Her name is Nora. Her middle name is Reyes. She learned to walk holding a fistful of tan and black fur, and the first full sentence anybody ever heard her say was, "Ranger come," which she delivered from the top of a porch step in a tone of complete authority, and the dog came. And on the night before she started kindergarten, she asked her mother the question that every kid eventually asked the one about where they came from and what happened, and Hannah sat on the end of the bed and thought about how to say it. Then she said it plainly because plainly was the only way it had ever worked. "You were born in a snowstorm in a cabin in the middle of the night," she said, "and nobody in the whole world knew we were up there. Nobody was coming, and a dog decided that wasn't good enough. There are people who will tell you that what happened on that ridge was luck. A stray on a highway, a man who happened to be driving it. Timing, they're wrong. A trained animal went 11 miles down a mountain through a whiteout, tore his feet to the bone, stood in front of a moving truck, and refused to move. And he did it because somewhere behind him, a woman he had been assigned to was dying, and because the only thing anybody had ever asked of him was that he go get help and bring it back. He got help. He brought it back. And nothing about that was luck."